Hey folks, so this is a little mini lecture that is going to get you really thinking about how to develop and incorporate effective graphics. I need to put on my glasses. I was like, why can't I see? So anyway, here we are. So just sort of understand that, and I will put a link to the PowerPoint slides so that you can see them again, right? So there's that. All right, so the most important thing that you want to keep in mind, and this makes sense because we've talked about this, is just to make sure that we're focusing on the audience and what they need. Because a lot of times, and I think we've all experienced this, where we'll see like a graphic in a text, and because there are certain things that don't get done, like in terms of attention, in terms of like, hey, what information does the audience need to understand why we included this graphic, and to understand the graphic and understand how it relates to the text, the actual things we're writing and why it matters, right? And make sure to design that clearly so that we understand. Most of us just skip things because we're like, this doesn't make any sense, and no one is trying to get us to understand. So really maintaining that focus on the audience is super important, okay? So in terms of tips for a general layout, so you can kind of see this graphic right here that's talking about how to stack logs in a fireplace. And we're going to go through different things about this, so don't worry. But the key thing that you want to think about is using headings and subheadings, and that basically creates a scannable document, and that is actually super important. And then you also want to make sure that you're integrating your text and your graphics, which basically means you put the graphic or the image of whatever it is that you're talking about next to the text where you're referencing it. And you should always, anytime you include a graphic, you have to explain in the text, right next to the graphic, like what it's for, why that illustration matters, okay? So that's really key, and it's critical, and that's a lot of the reason why people skip graphics is because no one does that part, and you need to as a tech writer, right? In addition to developing usable graphics, you also need to make sure to label each figure and also consistently label them. So if it's like figure 1 period and then the title, right? And you use title caps, right? So initial caps on everything but prepositions and articles, kind of like it's done down here. But you're going to want to label each figure. This is the figure label, so that people recognize what they're seeing, and use like really like parallel, in other words, consistently phrased figure, consistently formatted and consistently phrased figure titles. You also want to include callouts. You see these lines right here? So we're not talking about like call out like you're calling someone back into community after they've messed up. No, a call out is this little line, the leader line right here. That's a call out, right? And you can use those, and you should use those to clarify and emphasize important points and details. And you want to use lowercase letters or initial caps. I personally think lowercase letters is more visually pleasing, but I think initial caps are fine. But you want to make sure to use, I think you should use lowercase letters in the callouts, and then definitely use, the initial caps, meaning or title caps, when you are doing your figure labels. Again, all I mean by initial caps is that, or title case, is that anything that is not a preposition, in, of, to, etc., or an article like the, or a, or an, those things aren't capitalized, but the rest are. You can kind of see that here, right? So anyway, use callouts, use consistently formatted and consistently phrased figure labels. So that's really important, okay? So let's go on to the next thing. Okay, so you also want to, again, I said this already, you want to emphasize in the text the most important information that the reader should see in the graphic. So you can kind of see this here. So in step 3, position the log near the, oh, I've got to sneeze. I'm going to pause it. Sorry about that sneezing fit. So again, just kind of check this out. Position the log in the rear of the grate so that it rests against the wall of the fireplace. And on the small logs you put in. See figure 1 for an example of the log placement. So you can see that what they've done is said, okay, this is what you should be doing, and you can see this in figure 1. So you're basically telling your readers how to interpret the graphic. You should always do that, okay? We've already talked about this again because I gave you the sort of thesis statement heading into this, like the hot take, but you also want to insert graphics either directly below or beside the moment in the text that needs it, right? So this is, here we're talking about like the steps, because these are instructions, but the same thing with your technical descriptions. basically the idea is you want to have the image that you're inserting, like always have it next to the relevant piece of text. Don't just like let them dangle, right? Or do image, image, image in a row, because that's not an effective use of image, right? So keep that in mind. All right. Also, we talked about adding clear leader lines, right? Pointing to specific details and those call outs. Keep in mind that it's a really good idea to just use a simple clean line, right? Don't put an arrowhead because that could obscure part of your image. That's what I think anyway. So just kind of keep that in mind. In addition, you want to make sure you number each figure sequentially, so that, you know, figures 1, 2, etc. Write callouts and labels horizontally. You don't want to make someone have to like turn the page. Why do that to someone, right? That's not reader friendly. And then also like allow enough white space between the text and the graphics for readability. I mean, you want to have graphics close enough to the text, but the idea is that you want it to look, you know, like a scannable document. You see this? So this right here, this is all white space, right? But you can see that everything is really rather clean. So that's what we're talking about there when we're talking about stuff like white space. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is use color, texture, or shading to like add meaning, not just decoration. Now, sometimes you don't need to use color or shading. Sometimes people will use color in terms of like headings and subheadings, and that's perfectly fine. And you see that I do that in my course schedule, which is a technical document too, and I'm doing that to make it a scannable document for you. Right? So you can use color even with like headings and subheadings, or highlighting or color. Just use it in moderation, make sure it's aesthetic, avoid really cluttered graphics or graphics that don't actually show everything that you need to show. And that, my friends, is the end of this little mini lecture on how to develop effective graphics and practice patience while GPAT has a sneezing fit in the middle of the little mini lecture. But that's it, okay? And I hope that this is going to be helpful for you and guide you today as you're thinking about what you learned in homework about incorporating graphics, and then thinking about this sort of like info doodle that I want you to do today, because this stuff is actually super important. We really mess up when it comes to incorporating visuals in technical writing, and that is why it's really important for us to take a mindful moment to go back into that information and to create an infographic that helps us crystallize and remember those things. So even if you're like, oh, why are we doing this? Well, remember, one, it's easy and you're getting points for it, right? Because it's assignment 1. It's just assignment 1 is like this extension of these infographics, right? So there's that. But it's also like helping you remember stuff that, trust me when I tell you, it would be easy to forget if you didn't have this sort of practice we're going to do today.